สวัสดีครับ Welcome to Suthichai Live English. My guest today is a PhD student in the Department of Political Science at the University of Michigan. คุณเคนคุณมาทิสโลหะเตปานุน who has been working on politics, development, political parties with focus on Thailand and the broader Asia Pacific region. So I would invite Ken to discuss local politics today because he has devoted himself to following in depth the political developments in the country. Hi, Ken.
Hello, Kun Suthichai.
Hi.
Always a delight to be on your show.
Thank you. Thank you for taking part in this chat. How are you tracking Thai political developments these days when, all eyes are on the possibility of the Khao Klai Party, the Move Forward Party being dissolved? How would that scenario affect your analysis of Thai politics?
So I think that the first thing that I would note when it comes to the possibility that the Move Forward Party will be dissolved is the fact that this is a script, this is a political play that we have seen play out in Thai politics many times over the past 2 decades, right? It played out firstly with the Thai Rak Thai Party and the Phalang Prachachon Party, both affiliated with Kun Thaksin Shinawatra back in the 2000s, and then the Future Forward Party was dissolved in 2020, resulting in the emergence of the Move Forward Party today.
Yeah.
So in a sense, this is not really anything new to Thai politics at all. It is something I've seen it play out many times. And every time that this has happened, we've been able to notice how it may be quite easy to dissolve a political vehicle, but it is really a different task altogether to try to dissolve people's political loyalties. So in a way, while the dissolution of the Move Forward Party would be a seismic event, the Move Forward Party after won last year's elections, but on a different scale, we can also just think of the fact that the Move Forward's successor party, which is bound to be formed, will probably retain people's loyalties, and it will retain most of the voter base that they had won in 2023.
But there's also the possibility that the top leadership of Move Forward Party could be disqualified or could be banned from politics for many years to come, including Kun Pitha Limcharoenrat, Kun Chaithawat, the party leader, and those outstanding leaders that we see moving the party in the past few years. How would that affect the party, the new party, whatever label they're going to use?
So I think there are 2 possible scenarios here. The first being if the Move Forward Party is dissolved, then almost certainly the executive leadership would be banned from politics. So that would definitely have a heavy impact on the party. But there's also the possibility that all the MPs, all the 44 MPs that had signed on to the petition to amend the Laissez Majesté law could also be banned from politics as well. And that would impact an even larger number of MPs. So on one level, yes, that would be destabilizing for the party. The party would be tasked with having to find a new set of leaders for the successor party. And they might even leaders that they had thought of as backup leaders, but had signed on to the petition might also be banned. And so it's an open question of how deep the Move Forward bench is, how possible it is to find a leader who is charismatic enough to lead the movement forward. But at the same time, I'm not sure if we are at the point where the Move Forward Party needs a charismatic leader itself to be at the head of the party, right? So for example, when Thaksin was ousted from his positions, it didn't really seem to matter who Thaksin then selected to be the next leaders of the Palang Prachachon and the Pheu Thai parties. They were still election winning machines up until 2023. So in a way, I think that the fact that the Move Forward Party is in it, it's in a position to envy right now. The fact that it was ousted in such a dramatic position from its place as the election winner last year in what is really, it really was a made-for-TV drama, right? And that is really what people remember from last year.
That's right.
And so, yes, the leadership is a concern. The fact you have to rebuild a party from the bottom up is a concern. You have to recruit the party members again. You have to form all these local branches. It's not easy work. But fundamentally, I think the strategic position of Move Forward Successor Party would still be strong enough that perhaps, I'm skeptical on the position whether the leadership actually matters.
But that is a very optimistic view, because some people would think that if the head is cut off, then the rest of the body may find it difficult to move forward. But then, are we talking about new politics in Thailand, that people would give more attention or importance to policy, to platform, rather than personalities? You think that is happening in Thai politics?
So this is a very interesting question. And in fact, just last year, I ran a survey in Thailand, actually, as part of a research study, where we asked people to, if they were able to match a list of political, we gave them a list of political parties, and then we gave them a list of prime minister candidates, policies, and election campaign slogans. And we asked if they were able to match these, if they were able to match the party with the correct candidate, slogan, or policy or whatnot. And it turns out, yes, it is obviously, the people did the best on the prime minister candidates, right? It's very easy to identify Kun Pitha as, Move Forward's candidate, or Kun Prayut as United Thai Nation Party's candidate, for example. But at the same time, there was also a higher degree of ability to identify policies and slogans than we had initially anticipated. Lots and lots of people were able to identify Move Forward's, call for the demilitarization of politics. I think around 60% of people were able to identify Pheu Thai's 10,000 baht digital wallet policy. It is quite a high number. And so it seems to me that personalities matter, yes, but in our current political environment, people do also seem to be paying attention to policies and ideologies as well.
There's this interesting NIDA poll just came out the last such Sunday, which shows that Kun Pitha and Move Forward Party are still the top choice of the people.
Yes.
And Pheu Thai is ranked second. Kun Sethart Nevisin, the Prime Minister, is ranked the third, and then followed by Kun Paetong Than. That to me is also quite interesting, especially in view of the fact that the threat of dissolution is facing Khao Klai as well. Or maybe that it is because and not despite the approaching calamity, should I say, for Khao Klai Party. How do you read this NIDA poll? That Pitha, Khao Klai are still our choice, even if the road ahead is quite cloudy for Pheu Thai, for Khao Klai.
Yeah, it's an interesting poll, isn't it? The fact that so many people are still saying that Pitha is their top prime minister candidate, even though, the party is, as you say, facing impending doom, possibly. I read this poll. Well, number one, I agree with you that, perhaps it's being driven by sympathy as well. And secondly, as I said previously, the fact, Move Forward's position is still very much shaped by the political drama it suffered at the hands of Pheu Thai last year, which brings me to another point that this poll is not only a reflection of Move Forward's strengths politically, but also a reflection of Pheu Thai's weaknesses, right? I think that the Pheu Thai party, how shall I put it? I think the party has been relentlessly tactical rather than strategic. It has, every move that it's made since the 2023 election has allowed it to gain power and to retain that power in the short term. But it really is facing an immense question of what it needs to do in order to actually claw back political support and win the next election, whenever it may be. I'm sure there's a sizable core of Pheu Thai voters who remain loyal to Pheu Thai, who remain loyal to the Thaksin brand, for example. But I think that there were many people who were also on the fence, right, at the last election.
Yeah.
They weren't sure if they were going to vote for Move Forward. They weren't sure if they were going to vote for Pheu Thai.
Right.
Perhaps in the end, it was a close decision. They went for Pheu Thai anyway. I'm not sure how Pheu Thai wins those voters back. They haven't, they need to be able to justify to these voters, was the grand compromise they made with the conservative parties, was it, worth it? That's a justification they have to make. And I'm not quite sure that they've done nearly enough in the past 6 months to demonstrate yet that, to demonstrate to their voters at least, that it was a sacrifice worth making.
Yeah. It's also very interesting to note that this poll, neither poll results, came, I'm not sure whether it's because or despite the return of Thaksin to the political scene, right?
Yes.
Is it because or is it despite of Thaksin? The popularity of Pitha and Cao Kai rising in the wake of Thaksin's return and making his presence very public.
That is also definitely a very interesting question.
Yeah.
And in fact, we talk a lot about like the Thaksin factor in Thai politics, right? But I think the truth of the matter is we don't actually have concrete evidence that we can point to as to what is Thaksin's current role really in Thai politics. And I mean, there are a couple of theories we can point out, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps Thaksin is fully retired and he truly made good on his promise that he wanted to come home to take care of his grandchildren. Doesn't seem very likely to me, given the fact that, for example, in 2011, Pheu Thai ran on a Thaksin thinks, Pheu Thai acts policy, right? That's not something that sounds very viable to me. In fact, what seems much more likely to me is that, well, when Kun Thaksin was prime minister, he'd like to call himself the CEO, right?
CEO, yeah.
Thailand is a company, a company is a country. I'm going to run Thailand as a CEO state.
Yeah.
It appears to me that Kun Sethar, as prime minister, is more of a chief operating officer, right?
COO,
not really the
COO,
yes,
under the CEO,
yes.
right?
Right. Now, now I don't want to overstate this. We don't know for sure how power is structured within the current Pheu Thai government. But I think there is this lingering perception, certainly among the Thai people, that Prime Minister Sethar is not really someone who is in full control.
No.
He calls himself a national salesman, right? So the question is, well, if the Prime Minister is a salesman, then who's the CEO?
It's Kun Sethar's latest statement, public statement is, I, Sethar Thavisin, am the Prime Minister of Thailand under the Constitution. That's what he said.
Well, I could also imagine that.
Technically, of course, it's true, right?
Yes, it's true. And I guess, technically, if Kun Sethar heard, is watching the show, he might also say, yes, I'm the chief operating officer because the CEO is the people, for example.
Okay.
He could say that. But I think that what people have in mind is that when you have, it's an interesting political dynamic, right? This is the first time in maybe a decade and a half that Kun Thaksin is in Thailand as a free man, right? Not in the police general hospital.
Yeah.
So the question of his influence on politics has definitely become much more pertinent once again. And even more importantly, his daughter, Kun Pathong Than, is now the leader of the Pheu Thai party.
Yes.
The political vehicle on which Sethar's power depends. There was a picture when Kun Pathong Than became the leader of the Pheu Thai party where the Prime Minister, Kun Sethar, was kissing her hand.
Right.
And of course, he denied that it was a political statement.
Right.
But the symbolism of that is quite clear.
Right. But then, back to Pitha, back to Cao Kai, there was a story which is not confirmed, that Kun Thanathorn meeting members of the Move Forward Party the other day, told them that he was quite sure the party would be dissolved and that they must make preparations for a new party and to map out strategies for a new path to gain control of the parliament. Now, if that was the case, then a lot of homework is waiting for the third generation, we call it the third generation leadership of Cao Kai. And that would be a very interesting development because this also would be the first time in Thailand that we see this kind of development. It's not like Thai Rak Thai turning into Palang Prachachon and then Pheu Thai. Because with that, you had a clear picture of Kun Thaksin being in charge, and that the rest of Pheu Thai leadership will follow Kun Thaksin's direction. But with Cao Kai, with Move Forward Party, it's not that clear, is it?
Well, if the rumor that you discussed was true, that Kun Thanathorn has been telling MPs to get ready for the dissolution of their party and to move on to a new party, wouldn't that indicate as well that perhaps the spiritual leader of the party is in many ways still around, just like Pheu Thai's spiritual leader was still around?
Right. That's another topic for another research project, because family politics, or what do you call it? Parties owners are still very active. You have Pheu Thai with the image of Thaksin, you have Move Forward Party, the picture of Thanathorn, Phum Chai Thai, picture of Kun Nevin, it's so obvious that we have not crossed that real obstacle yet of being a real political parties that represent the people's hope and ambition. Anyway, back to the strategy of Move Forward Party that I can see. You can see that after Anakot Mai was dissolved, Thanathorn, Kun Piyabut moved backwards and formed what they call the Khao Na group, right? As
the progressive movement.
Progressive movement. Then Pitha rose to become the leader. Now, if the second generation of leaders is going to be banned as well, then they might move in the same direction. They might move with the progressive movement, and then let the third generation leaders become the frontline soldiers, so to say. You see that scenario happening?
I think it's very possible. And in fact, perhaps their only choice, given the fact that, if the leaders are banned, then there's really not much for them to do. I will note that I do think that it was interesting that there were some rising stars within the party that were not placed on the executive committee.
Yeah.
For example, Kun Sirikanya Tansakun, the deputy leader, and who was rumored to be the candidate for Minister of Finance if the Move Forward Party had indeed formed a government last year. She, if I recall correctly, is not a member of the executive committee. So I think that there were always these rumors that perhaps she was the designated survivor, I guess, so to speak.
Designated survivor, yes.
But she did sign the petition on amending the Lasem Majeste law, which I guess may have been a scenario they did not foresee. And so that if that was the case, then their succession plan has been disrupted, and they would have to find another leader.
Yes. Then you see Kun Aitim, Kun Parit, who
I don't think he's old enough to be prime minister, right?
No, as party leader maybe, and
right.
Maybe 4 years from now, 3 years from now, I don't know how old he would be then, but he's still not 35 yet. I mean, 4 years from now, no. Let's see, he's 31 right now, so an election would have to be held in exactly 4 years for him to be eligible. Exactly 4 years. So he's on the borderline, right? Anyway, The survival tactics would be to put some outstanding leaders up front, and that might involve, shifting gear and recruiting new people. But if I look from now until the next election, you will see Kun Thaksin's very serious attempt to revive Pheu Thai in competition with Move Forward Party. If Move Forward Party was disbanded, then Pheu Thai, do you think that is beneficial for Pheu Thai, for Kun Thaksin to be able at that stage to get Kun Paetongtarn to really lead the attack? What would Thaksin have to do to get the Move Forward Party out of the contest and push up Kun Paetongtarn?
So let's think through a couple possible scenarios, right? One scenario would be the Pheu Thai government decides to call an election earlier rather than later, when the Move Forward successor party is not yet, fully ready, and perhaps it takes advantage of the chaos that is resulting from Move Forward's dissolution to try to win more seats. Now, I'm not sure that plan would entirely work. There are also other parties that might capitalize, right? For example, Kun Yin Sudarat's Thai Sang Thai party did not join the current coalition. She's around to capitalize on that if she so wishes. So I not entirely convinced that plan would work. The more likely scenario, I think, is that Pheu Thai tries to push off the election as far into the future as possible in order for its economic policies to bear fruit, and then it runs on its economic record. Because after all, the Thaksin brand has always been about economic competence, right?
Yes.
This time around in the slogan, "Kit Yai Tham Pin," right? We're going to think big and we know how to execute. The problem with the strategy right now, though, is that, again, 6 months in, we haven't really seen Pheu Thai successfully execute its economic policies. Last year, growth was very sluggish. GDP growth came to about 1.9%. And Kun Sethar said, okay, then the antidote to that would be the 10,000 baht digital wallet policy, which is still, being stuck in a bureaucratic process. And even if you enact that policy, I'm not sure that's going to be beneficial for Pheu Thai I'll give you two reasons. The number one is that saying the 10,000 baht digital wallet policy is the antidote is a misreading of the economic situation, right? Last year, the GDP was down because there wasn't enough investment, not because consumption was down. So that's point number one. Point number two, I'm not convinced at all that economic populism, the Thaksin way, would be enough to win you an election in 4 years from now or whatever. Last year, the 10,000 baht digital wallet policy didn't win Pheu Thai the election. And indeed, if there was a party that should have been able to capitalize on economic populism, it really should have been General Prayut, right? He had a monopoly on state funds for the past 9 years. His half and half Kon La Krung policy was immensely popular. It was utilized by everybody. It was easy to use. It put money right into the hands of people's pockets. And yet the United Thai Nation Party won, if I recall correctly, less than 40 seats.
Yeah, right. So the strategy for Kun Thaksin to really be able to regain the number one position for Pheu Thai would not be easy.
Not at all, I think.
No. And of course, if they talk about young blood and progressive politics to compete with Move Forward Party, that's even more difficult. So, what are some of the options for Kun Thaksin? How does he get rid of the old guard in Pheu Thai? And then how does he build a new party with new blood and really convince the people that, hey, Ung Ing Paetongtarn is the leader of new politics. And up to a point when, the next election comes up, he might try to dissociate the party from the old guard, from the army, from the so-called establishment. You think he can still switch back and get Kun Paetongtarn to lead Pheu Thai party or the new Pheu Thai party that could really capture the votes of the young people?
Probably too early to say for sure. A lot can happen in 4 years, as you know, as a veteran observer of Thai politics.
Yes, yes.
But I I will say that I think that old guard and new guard is not just a question of age, right? For example, I saw this tweet today from the Phumjai Thai Party,
Yeah.
where the Phumjai Thai Party said we have unveiled a new executive board. It's a new generation of
Yes.
Ban Yai successors.
Right.
Ban Yai, of course, being euphemism for like local dynasties.
Yes.
Most people would look at that and say, well, you're still very much participating in this old style politics, right? And
Right.
you're openly admitting to it.
Yeah.
So it's if Pheu Thai is still dependent, on the old playbook of economic populism, if it hasn't managed to seize, more momentum on progressive social policies, if it isn't essentially if it's still not doing the things that Move Forward is doing and convincingly, I don't see why Move Forward's voters would go for Pheu Thai. In fact, right now, Pheu Thai has become, in their merit to convenience, yes, they've taken power, but they've been subsumed now almost under this conservative brand entirely.
Yeah.
And so, it might actually be more fruitful for Pheu Thai to chase conservative votes,
Yeah.
of which the question is, are there enough of those to win you an election?
Yes. Right. Right.
Hard to say.
Right. Right. So if you were to speculate about the most likely scenario for Move Forward Party from now in the next few weeks, perhaps, what would be, you think, the most likely scenario?
In the next couple of weeks,
Yes. I mean, if the Constitutional Court takes up the case and if things are speeded up just because of what some people believe to be pressure from many directions to get rid of Cao Klai as soon as possible. And in fact, some people even speculate that Kun Thaksin's mission, one of his missions as part of the so-called secret deal, is to not only that he can come back to Thailand, but in exchange, he must get rid of the so-called threat from the Move Forward Party. If things are, speeded up and Cao Klai has to go as soon as possible, what would be the likely scenario that you can see?
I think that the case is the earliest we're expecting a result is probably around in May, I think.
Yes.
So I'm not sure. I don't think we're going to see something sped up, faster than May.
Yeah.
But even May would be quite early for, in my view, quite fast for a decision of this, of the scale to be reached. And I really don't. I'm not sure whether there's actually anything that Pheu Thai has to do to for this eventuality. Although, if I were them, I might prepare for protesting. We did see what happened in 2020 when the Future Forward Party was dissolved.
Yes.
And of course, on the Move Forward side, it's the frenetic preparation of a successor party.
Yeah.
But again, I think we all that's only to be expected.
Yeah.
So really, the question really, I think, is again, are we expecting more mass dissatisfaction from people who voted for Move Forward as a result of Move Forward's possible dissolution? I think it would be quite possible. Although I have to say that last year I was wrong, because I thought that when Pheu Thai dumped Move Forward out of the coalition and formed a coalition with the conservative parties, at that point I thought that Move Forward supporters might protest. That didn't materialize. So we'll see whether or not there's more appetite for street protests this time around.
Why do you think that there was no protest at the time?
That's a great question. And to be quite honest, I'm not sure. I I would imagine a combination of reasons. Maybe number one, political fatigue. There's just a lot of political events going on last year.
Fatigue.
Maybe people were just exhausted with the whole, the whole psychodrama of coalition formation.
Yes.
Maybe that's possible. Secondly, maybe people have come to a grudging realization that, street protests in Thailand have rarely ever actually accomplished the goals they wanted alone, right? Without some, the yellow shirt protest succeeded because eventually it triggered a military coup in 2006 and then in 2014. Aside from that, it's really hard to see what a round of street protests can accomplish in a concrete way.
Maybe it's also because people can express their satisfaction on social media. They don't need to go out on the streets.
That's true, but I think that was also the case in 2020, right?
But social media in 2020 and 2023, 24, it's different. There's vast differences as well.
That's true.
Will we ever see Cao Klai party or whatever party under the new label becoming government, you think? Would that kind of progressive platform be accepted ever?
That's a great question.
Yeah, because we see a very clear division between conservative politics now that this government led by Pheu Thai under Kun Sethar will not rock the boat. They don't talk about reforms. They would not go after serious, corruption cases, while the progressive political platform talk about reform of all kinds, talk about even welfare state. We see a clear line between the two shades. But if we consider developments in the near future, hoping that we can see a new kind of politics taking over, really launching reforms, really tackle social issues, will that ever happen? Or is it going to be another compromise, even if the Cao Klai movement, whatever it's called, is a party or is it a social movement? If ever there would be a compromise between the two sides, the conservatives and the liberals forming a government, would the progressive platform ever be adopted, you think?
My response to that, I think, would be before 2023, the image of Seta and Prayut shaking hands, and watching the birds together in Government House, that would have seemed impossible.
Right.
That would have seemed like that was like that would be like fan fiction, right? So I really think that in Thai politics, anything can happen, and there. Strange bedfellows are not something to be unexpected in Thailand at all. But of course, that depends on many things, right? That depends on how on the result of the next election, on whether or not Move Forward can maintain its popularity and its momentum, on whether or not Thaksin and Pheu Thai are really unable to capitalize on their time and power and make good their economic promises. So still a lot of factors, I think, to take into account. I will say though that you mentioned the fact that even if Move Forward becomes government, will they be able to realize their policies?
Yeah.
The bureaucracy is like a party in itself, right? And
has always been.
I think that a Move Forward government that is largely inexperienced, largely not adept at dealing with Thailand's bureaucratic realities, will probably face a lot of difficulties early on, and it's it's an open question of, even if they do form a government, if they don't have a Senate that's on their side, if they don't have a large enough majority, if they don't have experience dealing with China's bureaucratic state, are they going to fare well? Well, that's a whole other can of worms, I think.
Yeah. But then some people say that when Kun Thaksin became prime minister about 20 years ago, he managed to tackle the bureaucracy in a very effective way. Bureaucrats listened to him. He managed to, for some reasons, to run bureaucracy the way he wanted. And why not in 2024?
I would say there is a difference, though, right, between Kun Thaksin's Thai Rak Thai party and the Move Forward party now. Thaksin's Thai Rak Thai party was not at all a government that was, that was brand new to politics. And people often forget this, but Kun Thaksin himself was deputy prime minister in previous coalition governments during the 1990s as well.
Yes.
So it's not like he's entirely new to the executive branch. And I think that he made his fair share of mistakes while he was, for example, foreign minister. And so in a way, with experience comes wisdom. And so I'm sure that benefited Thaksin and Thai Rak Thai in many ways. And Thaksin also surrounded himself with, a lot of politicians who were well established as well.
Yes,
so
yes.
It is very different from Move Forward, where if you try to think of, has any of Move Forward's most prominent members actually, ever held elected office beyond that of an MP, I think you would be hard pressed.
I know. So one of the biggest challenges for the Move Forward party would be bureaucratic reform.
Most likely, yes.
Now that you live and work in the United States, do you find it difficult to explain Thai politics to your American friends or to your foreign colleagues there? They will ask a lot of questions that you have to spend a lot of time explaining.
Whenever I give interviews to foreign media outlets, it always starts with me prefacing, so this happened back in 2001 and this happened in 2006, and then it's like this whole sequence, right, of events, and but without that context, you might just find the current election impossible to understand, for example. So it is not easy at all to explain Thai politics to a newbie. I think that it was late last year when I did a presentation in Michigan, actually, on the result of the election. It took a long time just to settle the context of everything. So yes, it's difficult.
I know. Well, tell us about yourself, something about yourself, what you're doing at the University of Michigan. How did you get there? What do you intend to do?
So I did I did a political science undergrad degree at UC Berkeley. And then after that, I worked at Thailand Development Research Institute for a while at TDRI. So while I was at TDRI, I worked on the innovation policy team. And what this team does is they produce policy recommendations for government agencies, mostly to do with economic restructuring, right? Thailand's stuck in the middle income trap. How do we escape that trap? What can we do on actually trying to turn Thailand into a high income country? So while I was there, I got to work on many interesting projects. I worked on projects on medical innovation, worked on a project on soft power in the creative industries, I worked on one on Thailand's research ecosystem. I think it really shaped my desire to want to study this in more detail. And so now at Michigan, I am still focused mostly on, the relationship between political institutions, development, the middle income trap, those sorts of questions. Yeah.
I'll be very interested in reading your conclusions on how Thailand can get out of the middle income trap. That I think is a very relevant topic, and we are all looking for solutions to that. Do you think your thesis will offer some concrete solutions? Hopefully.
I we'll see where I go with my thesis. But in the political science literature, there's a lot of discussion on like structural conditions, right?
Yeah.
On, for example, there's a whole body of literature that talks about how the countries that became developmental states, the countries that became high income countries, were ones that were facing external security pressures, were ones that had scarce natural resources, and so they were the ones that were forced to really develop the political institutions necessary to facilitate development, and that Thailand didn't have enough of these pressures. Well, when I read this literature, something I've always thought about, is like, now what kind of agency do we have as policymakers and as political leaders to actually, make things better, right? So hopefully I can do more research in this area.
Thank you. Great. Thank you very much, Ken ครับคุณเมทิสโลหะเตปานนท์ for taking part in this very interesting and I would say provocative discussion today. Thank you, Ken. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you for having me.
สวัสดีครับ สวัสดีครับ